This is a podcast about both having autism and living with someone who has autism. My mom is Sonya, and I'm Josh, and this is Josh Has Autism.
Hey everybody, welcome to Josh Has Autism.
Hello.
Normally I run my mouth for quite a while before we get started, and then I ask you questions. But this time is a little bit different because you came to me with an idea that you have.
Yeah.
And it's about waves.
Yeah.
I think like in terms of a brain wave, but
Yeah.
I don't know what you're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm just going to trust that it's going to be awesome. So just take it away.
Okay. So I actually, what I have ready for this, because I thought of this, I was really excited about all this, and I started writing stuff down, and I got stuff down after stuff down after stuff down, just trying to get it all together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so much that I finally just started to try and rewrite it into little pieces, I guess.
Yeah. So I think like I would call that like going down the rabbit hole, where you just start something and you just you just keep on one thing after the other on top of another information you're finding, and just you're in deep in discovery.
Yeah. And so this one about waves.
So let me ask you first of all, how did you come up with the idea, the concept?
There was two parts to it. One is just the idea that a lot of sayings
Mm-hmm.
in English, and a lot of real scientific things even involve waves. And looking at different aspects of science, there's the term waves are used in just about all of them. Whether it's light, whether it's electricity, whether it's basically there's sound, there's lights, there's matter in general.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at water, for example. The how quickly of a wave that let's say it's just straight H2O, no anything else in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's water, the liquid form that most people see it as.
Mm-hmm.
There's ice, which is the waves of the way I remember it explained to me in science class in like 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the energy is excited and it's always moving around.
Mm-hmm.
Even if something is solid, or you don't see what's moving around and it doesn't look like it's moving around, it is. Mm-hmm. So
even a rock that you would see.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. And so water is moving pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
Ice is still moving, but it's slower than water is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the gas version of water, steam, is hyped up on Adderall. It's moving really fast.
Yeah.
And so it's all in how fast of a small movements are.
Mm-hmm.
Of those waves.
Right. Gotcha.
And so that, as that example, that's all scientific stuff.
Yeah. And the stuff that, right, and so the science of that's like, you get that completely. You're fascinated by that. And for me, in healing modalities, you'll find that there's sound therapy, there's light therapy.
Mm-hmm.
When you use crystals to help heal people, it's because there's a vibration held by particular crystals. So certain colors of crystals will match with the chakras that we have, and that energy is used to heal particular energies in the body. Same thing you're talking about, right?
Actually, yeah. I mean,
It's the first time that I've talked about that stuff and you haven't looked at me like, go away.
so I have some stuff written down. I'm going to try and...
Yeah, go for it.
So, Britannica.com, which are the people who make the encyclopedias and the natural books and stuff like that, their definition of wave is the propagation of disturbances from place to place in a regular and organized way.
Mm-hmm.
To me, what all that means
Mm-hmm.
is that it's a pattern of movement.
Yeah. 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 Now I'm starting to catch on why you like it so much. It's a pattern. Right.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all interrelated too.
What do you mean?
So, I'll explain that.
Okay.
So, the visible spectrum of light, it sounds like a step away from what we were just talking about, but I'll get to it.
Okay. All right.
The visible spectrum of light, like the colors of the rainbow, from violet all the way over to red, it's honestly only a very small part of the much larger spectrum called the electromagnetic spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to have a lot of science stuff in it.
Okay. No, it's cool.
So going one way past the color violet, you have ultraviolet, you have X-rays, and you have gamma rays, which are all extremely dangerous if you experience them directly.
All right.
In a lot of quantity.
Right. So, like you're saying, the human body cannot handle
A lot of it, correct.
that much energy.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you get an X-ray done,
Mm-hmm.
it's using X-rays
Mm-hmm.
for a split-second moment
Right.
to take an image of that, an X-ray image.
Right, and that's why the people that are giving the X-ray,
Yeah.
they hide behind a wall or behind something that's going to protect them because they do it all day, every day.
Right, and they also have you wear the lead-lined garments,
Mm-hmm.
because the lead will prevent that
Mm-hmm.
from getting
Those
to
things
you
are
easily.
heavy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's going one direction from the rainbow. If you go past red in the other direction, you have infrared, you have radar waves,
Mm-hmm.
you have microwaves,
Mm-hmm.
television waves,
Mm-hmm.
and radio waves.
Mm-hmm.
So this means that radio waves technically are on the light spectrum.
Radio waves.
Radio waves.
Wow.
So radios use radio waves to transmit sound. So why would radio waves be on a spectrum with colors?
Mm.
And the answer is because our senses are developed in such a way to interpret the information we get in a coherent manner while not being overwhelmed.
Hmm. You take in what you can take in.
Yeah, in other words,
If
too
it's-
much change too quickly hinders our ability to adjust.
Now I see why we're talking about this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I get it.
A good example, and real world example, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everything is real world for me, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
Is something called a flashbang.
A flashbang?
Yes.
Is it one word or two?
It's technically one word, but it does both.
Okay.
It does exactly what it sounds like.
Okay, flashbang.
Yes.
Okay.
It's a...
Are you saying, so flash, B-A-N-G?
yes.
Okay.
It's basically a grenade that is non-lethal.
Okay.
It's used for militaries and police forces and stuff like that.
Okay.
Whenever there's a chance that someone could be hurt.
I see.
Yeah.
So it just creates a disturbance.
What it does is cause extreme disorientation by overloading a person's hearing and vision at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that temporarily causes those senses to fail.
All of them all at once?
Hearing and vision.
Okay.
The change is a shock to the system, with too much change to adjust to in too short a span of time. And so it's an example of there being too much all at once to try and comprehend. It's
Right.
not happening.
Right. So it's interesting because I didn't know what it is that you're talking about. I didn't know that that's exactly what it did.
Mm-hmm.
But it is so interesting because that means that somewhere along the line, people that are not me put together that if you disrupt these faculties, these senses of somebody, they can no longer continue doing what they're doing. Kind of like a stun gun.
Yeah.
Right?
It overloads the nervous system.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the police would use that to stop somebody from
shooting someone else.
Right.
Well, in the sense that they would not be able to see or hear someone where they're at.
I see. So if all of a sudden, if you couldn't see and you couldn't hear, and you were a person that the second before that you could see and you could hear, I could see why that would be so disorienting.
Yeah. And it's, very much so.
Yeah.
And not necessarily to a lesser degree, well, I guess kind of because I can still see and hear, but it oftentimes becomes way too much for me to handle whenever there's a lot going on or I'm just overwhelmed with situations that I'm in.
Yeah.
And it makes it very difficult to function.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel disoriented when that happens? So it's kind of similar, but maybe, as you say, on a lesser scale because you can still see and hear.
Right. And it hampers me mentally, I guess, of being able to comprehend and adjust to what's going on. And so having routines that I can fall back on, having knowledge of what's going on around me and what's going to be happening in the short term really helps me be able to adjust.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to waves, is that these waves are all interconnected scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
So sound is technically on the same spectrum as what we can see.
Say that again.
Sound, through radio waves or what have you, are on the same spectrum as colors as what we can see.
Okay.
And what I find curious about that is that we have to use a different sense to even comprehend that something else is occurring. Like, imagine you're mute, or not mute, deaf.
Okay.
You wouldn't know that there's other things going on. You might feel the bass of
Sure.
music going on in your chest or something like that.
Sure.
Which is another form of wave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sound waves, yes, but it's a form of resonance, which is a thing where the sound waves, or just waves in general, coincide with one another and amplify each other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what resonance is, or harmonizing
Mm-hmm.
is the correct term for that.
So if that's harmonizing, then what you would feel is dissonance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is very not a not good feeling. And
Right.
Now
Yeah.
in waves, typically they either cancel each other out whenever they're not harmonizing or actively working against each other. They typically cancel each other out. That said, there are some times where it just doesn't work. Doesn't cancel each other out. And it's still happening either way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You want to say it again?
No,
Okay.
I don't. No.
You got it right?
I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
I'm excited about all this.
Yes, I can tell. Yeah, very cool.
The big thing about all of this, though, is that just because you don't have the senses to realize something else is happening, like with that example of being deaf, you don't know someone's speaking to you but from behind you because you can't hear them.
Right. So an example of that is Connor just had ear infections,
Mm-hmm.
and we found out he has allergies really bad, so his ears were stuffed up, and he wasn't answering to anything anybody was saying to him. And so his dad, he's, I'm gonna try something. He went up behind Connor
Mm-hmm.
And said, "Connor, nothing. Connor, nothing. Connor, nothing." Tapped him on the shoulder. He turned around to look at him like, "What's up?" He could not hear a thing. So yes. So that was interesting, right? He relied on that sense, and it was gone all of a sudden.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, going with that example, or along those lines of that example, if you don't know something is occurring,
Mm-hmm.
excuse me, sorry, if you don't realize that something is occurring,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that it's not.
Correct.
So some people have better hearing than others. Obviously, hearing aids exist for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But some people have better than average hearing, better than normal hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have better than normal vision.
Mm-hmm.
It just
Sure.
different things like that.
Right.
Just because someone can sense something more doesn't mean that because you can't, it doesn't occur or it isn't true.
Right. Doesn't mean that they can't. So if you can't, doesn't mean the other person can't.
Right.
Okay.
That's
Mm-hmm.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the things I've figured out and learned on both sides of that. That for me, from when I was little, if I didn't see something or didn't believe something, whatever, it wasn't true, basically.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Yes. We had to prove things to you.
Yeah.
If we didn't provide proof, it didn't exist.
Yeah, pretty much. And
I forgot about that.
yeah.
Yes.
And so growing up, I learned to accept that some things I wouldn't be aware of. And there were also times where I would experience something and know it to be true, and it was true, but I couldn't necessarily explain it to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Was that at the time based on the not knowing what words to use to express yourself, or was it just that you really could not put words to it? Is that the same thing? I meant it two different ways.
I think you said it the same as a similar way, but what I mean is that one was that yes, sometimes I wouldn't have the words to explain what.
But you did, yes, right. You didn't have the vocabulary to explain it,
right?
Versus you were in like a shutdown mode, so to speak, and you couldn't express it,
Right.
even though you knew what it was.
Right. Which typically, at a young age especially, the former would lead to the latter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they were, growing up, they were absolutely connected.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Where I couldn't explain something properly, and trying to do so made it so I couldn't explain things, period.
Correct. Yes.
So that was one part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part was that my experiences would not necessarily differ, but I would, in a given situation, catch more or different things than everyone else.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, like, the first time I really remembered thinking about this, for the experience being different, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
We had not moved to Pennsylvania yet at the time. We were still living in a different part of Virginia
Mm-hmm.
than we do now.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was outside playing, and from really far off or whatever, I heard a number of gunshots that were really close together. And I think, Mom, I think that you and Dad were outside with me, and I remember saying something along the lines of, that was 5 bangs. But they happened so quickly together that you guys couldn't say that.
Correct. Yes.
And
so it was such a rapid fire that we could not distinguish one from the next.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And
But you could.
yes, like I think you guys thought it might have been 3 or something like that, but it was 5 or something like that. That kind of difference.
Sure.
And it wasn't that you guys didn't believe me, it's that you experienced something different than what I did.
Exactly.
And I remember that night on the news, I was validated.
Victory!
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's not necessarily that I'm right and you're wrong. That's not what I'm going for with this story.
Right.
Although it was true, it's not what I'm going for. It's that the experience that I had in that was different than yours, and that I could notice it. That I was able to experience that and see more of it, or in this case, hear more of it.
Yes. Than
what you guys did.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say at the time, our hearing was perfect. I mean, there were no issues. Dad wears hearing aids now.
Yeah, which is also funny because around that time period, I also had to have tubes in my ears, and medicine a lot. But
no, that was after.
That was after?
That was after. You had the tubes when you were 2 years old.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was after. So
I thought you meant the tubes came after. I'm like, wait a second, what?
Yeah, you were 2 years old when you had the tubes put in.
Okay.
So, it's you didn't even communicate really until you were 3, other than screeching, and it was very difficult for you to put words to it. But once you got the tubes, boy,
yeah,
you just still turn into a chatterbox.
Yeah, and so my point is, throughout all of this,
Mm-hmm.
is that in my experience, and I've looking back at many of the friends I've had that have been on the autism spectrum, we tend to experience a lot more at any given time
Mm-hmm.
than most other people. We notice a lot more,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're trying to.
Process?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to process a lot more constantly,
Mm-hmm.
and so when something occurs that's a severe change, not even severe change, but just a very unexpected change that occurs in a short amount of time, it's very difficult to adjust to that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily. I'm trying to.
No, you're doing great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff is constantly being processed and seen, experienced,
Mm-hmm.
and then being
And
processed.
felt.
And, yeah, experienced and then processed.
Yeah.
And comparatively, a lot of what is experienced and processed is typically ignored by a lot of other people. And so I wouldn't say it's easier for others to adapt, to adjust. It's along the right lines of words,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
There is a difference. And it is difficult to try and explain and show that at times.
In the moment?
Especially in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so having, for me, having these waves of everything being interconnected in some way, there is a lot of overlap for everything. And you don't really realize that until you start looking at the waves.
Explain that.
So one thing to look at is the scientific stuff,
Mm-hmm.
where there's the electromagnetic spectrum, like I was
Mm-hmm.
talking about.
Right.
But then there's also like there's something called a seismic wave,
Mm-hmm.
which occurs with an earthquake that radiates outward from that point. That's actually how they triangulate where earthquakes originate.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Is by having multiple points and using that wave.
Right.
So, with that said, that's still a type of wave, and having the time between each location is how they are able to triangulate where it originated. Now with sound,
Mm-hmm.
there is a difference in how even in the microphone right here,
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bar that says how loud something is.
Yes.
So that's another type of wave, is how loud something is. There's another part of that where the sound waves are actually, if you want to think about it in purely literal terms, speaking to someone is literally using concussive force.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Just with different variables and different wavelengths, different pitches are also the higher something is, the closer together the frequency of that wave is. The deeper the sound, the further apart. There's waves in literally everything.
Yes, absolutely.
And one of the most beautiful things in nature is the aurora borealis. And one thing I'd like to point out is that occurs when radiation from the sun is expelled directly into the Earth's magnetic field. And that force of all of that energy, all of those waves colliding, is what creates on the visible spectrum of what we can see, such a beautiful sight. And that's amazing to me.
Right.
And so the waves that I've brought up so far have all been not really stuff you can see, other than the aurora borealis, which is actually the result of the waves.
Right.
So one thing that I could then I could try to explain again, or not again, but in a different way, is water's waves. So let's say you have a perfectly still pond. You put a rock and you drop it right in the middle of it. You'll have the waves coming out from it, and it'll hit the shore and come back and create all the different ripples.
Right.
So that is a visible kind of wave. On the ocean, you see all kinds of waves everywhere. And part of that is because of all the different shorelines and different depths and everything like that. But that's also the result of magnetic pulls, or gravitational pulls between the moon and Earth and the water that's pulled between them and causing the different tides, which is another form of, on that electromagnetic spectrum. And so it's all interconnected. I'd even go so far as to say, and this part isn't in the scientific stuff that I've seen, that I've experienced and read and everything like that, that riding the wave of popularity is a verbal example.
Yes.
It's a slight exaggeration, kind of, but it's a real thing. A perfect example of that is more easier to see would be fads.
Yes.
Where a popular design or something popular is popular for a time, goes away for a bit for something else that's popular, but it comes back later as reimagination or something like that, and it's popular again.
Yes, a lot of women will say about their clothes, just keep it long enough and it'll be back in style again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just clothes either, it's also toys and things like that.
Yep.
But it's a very real thing. And so it's interesting to me that it's not just the scientific stuff, it's also the social stuff. Radiating anger, radiating smugness. Those are emotional aspects to waves. Because if you see someone stomping down the sidewalk, looking really intense and everything, you're going to stay away from them.
If you're smart.
Yeah. And that is a type of wave. Like the crowd that may be in front of them may see him coming and part like a wave.
Mm-hmm.
It's all interconnected like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really interesting to me
Mm-hmm.
that I just haven't seen anyone put all of this stuff all together.
And so what you're saying is that you experience, like, the waves that you're describing that are all around us, and everything that we see or touch or feel,
Mm-hmm.
it's all a wave.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that I know, the way that I think about this and the waves that you're talking about, is that you have different regions of your brain,
Mm-hmm.
and they are moving around, and they can connect and communicate with other regions of your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens and they're working together,
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense. Everything feels good, it's calm, it's relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
But if you get them doing their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like...
being on the wrong wavelength.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not comfortable.
No, it's not at all.
It's not comfortable. So it's like when you talk about music, it's the difference in listening to something that is in the same key, or the notes that are in fall into under that key,
Mm-hmm.
and those that don't. I mean, have you heard the kids playing the piano?
They walk in the room, I go out the room, basically. I try to, at least.
It's
Because a lot of times I know I'm going to be overwhelmed really quickly,
mm-hmm.
and I don't want to upset them either. So
Sure. So the kids for you are like that equipment that the police have. So the kids show up, and it's like it goes off, and you are overwhelmed.
Yeah. Have you heard Connor?
Yeah. Yes, and we have figured out he does not speak in an inside voice because he wasn't hearing for so long. And he's probably going to have tubes put in his ears.
Mm.
But we didn't know that.
Mm.
Yeah. And so, when you started to put this together, what made it click for you that this is how you feel and interpret and experience things differently? How did the science reach you the way that it did?
So part of it was just making sense of how things are interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
And my knowledge, trying to put all that together in a way that makes sense. Another part of it, though, is novels, sci-fi, fantasy, all this other stuff. How would that equate? How would that happen? Just different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that really got my attention this time to actually do this on the podcast, part of that was a conversation I was having with RJ about superhero movies and comic books, which tied into all the different things I've been reading recently, and what would be the most overpowered power ever. And my thought, after thinking about it, it occurred to me, being able to control and manipulate waves, because that encompasses everything.
Right.
And I mean, you have Superman. He has super strength. He can shoot lasers from his eyes. All this other stuff. If you control waves, you can stop him flat. It's ridiculous if you think about it. If you can control concussive waves, like from going past Mach 1 or whatever, the speed of sound.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that I don't whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If you go faster than the speed of sound, you create a sonic boom.
Yes.
Which, if you do that near anything like glass or anything like that, will shatter it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can control the concussive force, the kinetic wave
Mm-hmm.
that comes from it, there's no damage being done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, yeah.
Were you able to come up with anything? Is this something that you just? It feels really good because it sounds like you had an idea.
Yeah.
Came up in conversation, and then it clicked. Something clicked, and then you did research and you discovered how much it is all around us, permeates everything in our existence.
Right. So I've had that kind of thought
Mm-hmm.
for a long time.
Okay.
It was putting it together
Mm-hmm.
in that conversation about superheroes
Right.
and things like that
Yeah.
that made me start thinking about it.
Mm-hmm. And does it help you in any way? I mean, is it something that you just feel, well, this is really cool? You see this and you made this connection, or is there more to it? Is it helped you to put things in categories for yourself, or?
So one thing it has done is it has helped me put things into categories, into how they fit together and how they would fit together.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, it's not necessarily a thing that this is going to sound like another pun. It has helped me more or less go with the flow a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's helped me to understand that I can't help everything, I can't do everything,
Mm-hmm.
and to accept that and continue forward.
Wow, that's a huge life lesson.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. I'm still right about most stuff.
That's a true statement. It's also a true statement that you make me crazy in between. Yes. So that's really cool. So what's happened in all this is you kind of your world has gotten bigger.
Yeah.
And you see the things that are all around you and how they are interconnected and how it works, and therefore you don't have to be in control of all things.
Right.
Hmm.
Right. And another point that has occurred to me, going along with the ocean kind of thing, with all the waves that are constantly going up and down and creating other waves,
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, people are like each of those waves.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a wave out in the ocean that's constantly going up and down, it's constantly affecting all the rest of them,
Mm-hmm.
especially the ones right next to it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always having an effect,
Right.
just like people.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't always see that, don't always recognize that even if it's not, even if they don't see it, they affect others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I always think that every single person makes a difference,
Yeah.
and that your mindset, the words that you speak, the energy that you carry,
Mm-hmm.
You can make a decision about this. You can, a joy, love is a higher, finer vibration.
Mm-hmm.
Sadness, fear is a low vibration, and Think about that. If one person decides to send out the higher vibration, to hold that within themselves, and then that's how they move in their family, and then that family goes out and moves in the neighborhood, and that those neighbors then go and move around in the community, and then that community moves around in the state, and then the state moves around into
but it's not. I will say that that's the positive only version.
Well, sure. I'm a
Yeah.
Yes, I'm an optimist, eternal optimist. Yes, I get that, and likewise, I get that when people
are down.
Yes, which does happen.
Yeah. Or angry or whatever.
Yep. It's part of life.
It's all creating waves against each other, which creates more waves. Which so some people have bad days but are good people. And some people have good days and are bad people.
Okay.
It doesn't mean that a bad person will always be bad or always be good.
Right.
They all have an effect on someone else.
Yes, correct.
And it's...
Well, there's a philosophy that says you can't have the light without the dark.
Yeah.
And so it's yin yang. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And therefore, those dichotomies are present always in all things.
Yeah. Light versus dark, good versus evil, all those things. And it's interesting to
Kong
me
versus
that...
Godzilla.
Huh?
I said Kong versus Godzilla.
Okay. I get the reference. No, it doesn't work.
No. I tried. I tried to do one of your geek things. Okay, I'll stop.
To my curiosity is that it never mentions the shadows. It never mentions the gray. It never mentions the in-between.
Yeah.
So...
What does that mean to you?
Which part?
What you just said. The gray.
The gray?
Yeah.
That there's always going to be good days and bad days no matter who you are. And if you are constantly... No one is going to constantly be the constant dark, the always evil kind of thing. It doesn't happen. There's also going to be those times where they have the good, or the bad person does have a good day, where the good person would have a bad day.
Right.
So there's always going to be those different grays in between. And a lot of that is because of how the waves interact. So...
and a big sigh from you.
I'm happy I was able to even explain this much of it. So.
I think you articulated that perfectly. Yeah. Wow. Very cool. Very cool. And so I can see that you're excited about this.
Yeah.
Yes. And so that when you really get excited about something, you can do anything you want. So fantastic. Anything else?
Lots, but not that I can think of.
Okay. All right. I'm applauding. Great job. That was really good. That was really good. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, if you want to send Josh a message and tell him how awesome he is, please do. You can go to our website. You know what? You can. I was just told to let everybody know this, that you can subscribe to Josh Has Autism on YouTube. You can also listen if it's Apple. There's an app that you can.
There's a whole bunch of different ways. Please just listen to us.
Yeah, but there's an app on an iPhone and an iPad that I don't remember how you do it. Anyway, it's an app. So anyway, but if you subscribe to YouTube, that would help us out an awful lot. And if you give us 5 stars, that would be great. Yeah. Especially today, since Josh was so awesome.
Yeah. SonyaKing.com, SonyaKing.com.
Thanks. Everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I hope you're having a good day and you're happy and healthy. Love you.
Bye.